Everybody wants success to look loud, flashy, instant. But the truth, success don't shout. Success whispers. It don't show up in the spotlight. It's born in the dark, in the grind, in the quiet hours when nobody's watching. That's where champions are made. That's where you decide if you want to be noticed for a moment or respected for a lifetime. Discipline beats desire because desire is fleeting. It comes and goes like the wind. It changes with the circumstances. It shifts with your emotions. But discipline is the anchor that holds you steady when everything else tries to move you off course. Think about it. Desire can get you started. It can spark you for a moment. But when the spark burns out and the fire isn't naturally burning anymore, what keeps you showing up? Discipline. Discipline is the thing that makes you rise when the alarm clock goes off, even when your body screams for more sleep. It's the force that makes you go back to the gym when the soreness tells you to stay home. It's the silent voice that refuses to negotiate when temptation whispers in your ear. Desire makes promises, but discipline delivers results. Everybody desires success. Everybody desires greatness, but desire alone has never built a legacy. Look around at the people who chase dreams but never see them through. They had desire. They wanted it badly, but they never built the habits that made it possible to reach the finish line. Desire is emotional. Discipline is structural. Desire says, I feel like it today. But discipline says, I'll do it whether I feel like it or not. The difference between people who dream and people who achieve is that achievers turn discipline into a way of life. They don't rely on mood, they rely on method. They don't let circumstances dictate their grind. They let their grind dictate their circumstances. Desire is noisy. It shouts, it gets you hyped, it fills you with energy for a season. But discipline is quiet. It doesn't care about noise. It doesn't need a crowd. It doesn't need applause. Discipline is the invisible force that builds champions long before the cameras ever turn on. It's the player who stays after practice, shooting free throws when the gym is empty. It's the student who rewrites notes again and again while their friends scroll through distractions. It's the entrepreneur who keeps showing up to build, even when the first 10 attempts failed and no one believes in them. Desire fades when obstacles appear, but discipline thrives in obstacles because it doesn't depend on feelings, it depends on commitments. When you look at those who dominate their fields, athletes, leaders, creators, you don't see people who simply had the strongest desire. You see people who had the strongest discipline. Because talent will get you noticed, desire will get you started. But discipline is what keeps you climbing when the mountain feels endless. Discipline is not glamorous, and that's why most people run from it. It looks like sacrifice. It feels like discomfort. And it demands that you say no far more often than you say yes. Discipline is built in the small choices, the daily decisions that don't seem to matter in the moment, but stack into habits. And those habits eventually define your destiny. Desire says, I want the reward. Discipline says, I'll suffer for it. And here's the truth. Success is not built on what you want. It's built on what you're willing to endure. If you only move when you're motivated, you'll never move consistently enough to matter. Motivation is a spark, but discipline is the engine. It doesn't stop because the weather is bad. It doesn't stop because you're tired. It doesn't stop because you failed yesterday. Discipline resets every single day. No excuses, no negotiation. The people who build legacies are not the ones who felt inspired every day. They are the ones who acted disciplined every day. Desire focuses on the outcome, but discipline focuses on the process. Desire says, I want to be a champion. Discipline says, I'll do today's work like a champion would. Desire looks at the trophy. Discipline looks at the training. Desire looks at the applause. Discipline looks at the preparation. Desire dreams about what success feels like, but discipline trains until success becomes inevitable. And the irony is this: When you discipline yourself long enough, when you master the small routines day after day, you eventually create a life that feels like the very dream desire once teased you with. Most people quit not because they lack desire, but because they lack discipline to sustain the grind when the feelings ran out. Think about students who start the year with fresh goals, but slowly let distractions eat away at their time. Think about new employees who enter the job with fire but lose it when the reality of hard work sets in. Think about athletes who train hard for a season but can't stay consistent off season. In every case, the common factor is not lack of desire, it's lack of discipline. Because discipline doesn't care about seasons. Discipline doesn't care about moods. Discipline is relentless, and that's why it beats desire every single time. Desire tells you to celebrate early. Discipline tells you to keep working. Desire tells you shortcuts are okay if they get you there faster. Discipline tells you shortcuts will destroy you in the long run. Desire tells you to quit when it hurts. Discipline tells you to embrace the hurt because it's shaping you into someone who can handle more. Desire is selfish. It's about how you feel, what you want, what you crave. Discipline is selfless. It's about who you're becoming, what standard you're holding yourself to, what future you're building beyond this moment. You have to understand, the world is full of people who wanted it, but very few are remembered because wanting it doesn't make you exceptional. Doing what others won't consistently, quietly, relentlessly, that's what separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. And discipline doesn't just beat desire. It teaches you how to control it. It refines your desires. It burns away the shallow wants and focuses you on the essential needs. Because when discipline becomes your master, you no longer live by feelings. You live by principles. And principles outlast passion, they outlast hype, they outlast the noise. So when the morning comes and you don't feel like moving, when the temptation to quit feels louder than the reason you started, when the applause is gone and the room is empty, it won't be desire that carries you forward. It will be discipline. It will be the structure you built, the promises you kept to yourself, the habits you refused to break even when no one was watching. Discipline is the quiet force that turns dreams into plans and plans into realities. And once you understand that, once you live by that, you'll never be fooled by the temporary rush of desire again. Routine shapes reality because what you repeatedly do becomes the framework of your life, the invisible architecture that decides your results long before the big moments arrive. People love to talk about goals. They love to dream about the future. They love to paint pictures of where they want to be, but very few are willing to examine the small routines that either carry them toward that vision or quietly destroy it piece by piece. Routine is powerful because it doesn't ask whether you feel ready. It doesn't care if you're motivated. It doesn't wait for perfect timing. Routine is the execution of choices transformed into habits, and those habits are what carve out your reality. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your routines. Every morning you wake up, you are already stepping into a routine, whether you recognize it or not. If your first move is grabbing the phone, scrolling through distraction, comparing yourself to the world, then you've already surrendered to a routine that steals your focus. If your first move is setting intention, feeding your body and mind with something that strengthens you, then you've already aligned yourself with a routine that builds your future. It's not the one massive effort that defines success. It's the repeated discipline of doing the right things day after day. People think success is built in the big moments, the championship game, the promotion, the breakthrough performance. But the truth is those moments are simply reflections of routines built in silence. When no one was watching, when no one was clapping, routine shapes your reality because it creates momentum. Momentum is not magic, it's mathematics. If you do something small, but productive every single day. The compounding effect of that action begins to change your life in ways desire never could. A writer who commits to writing a page a day will have a book in a year. A student who commits to studying 1 hour consistently will master subjects others struggle with. An athlete who commits to the same drills repeatedly will create muscle memory that separates them under pressure. It's not talent that sets people apart nearly as much as the routines they submit themselves to. Talent is a gift, but without the right routines, it becomes wasted potential. Most people underestimate the power of routines because they seem boring, they seem ordinary, they don't give you that rush of excitement. But that's the secret. Ordinary repeated long enough becomes extraordinary. Brushing your teeth doesn't feel heroic, but do it daily for years and it transforms your health. Saving a small amount of money doesn't feel like wealth, but do it consistently and it changes your financial reality. Exercising for 20 minutes doesn't feel like greatness, but stack those days into months and you've reshaped your body and your energy. People are often trapped by the illusion that greatness comes from rare acts, when in reality, it comes from consistent acts that look unimpressive in the moment. Routine also acts as protection against the chaos of life. Life will throw challenges, distractions, emergencies, and temptations at you. But when you are grounded in a routine, you have stability in the storm. You don't have to decide every day whether or not to do the work because the decision has already been made by your routine. This reduces mental fatigue. It frees your energy for execution. It saves you from negotiating with yourself. Think about it. If every day you had to debate whether you'd brush your teeth, you'd waste energy in a pointless battle. But because it's routine, you just do it. Imagine transferring that same automatic discipline into areas that truly matter for your growth. That's why the most successful people in any field have ironclad routines. They don't waste energy deciding whether to train, whether to study, whether to practice. It's non-negotiable. The danger of ignoring routines is that you still end up building them only by default rather than by design. A routine of procrastination is still a routine. A routine of excuses is still a routine. A routine of scrolling, overeating, complaining, avoiding responsibility. These are all routines that silently shape a reality of mediocrity. Your current life is the harvest of your past routines. If you're not happy with where you are, it's not because of one decision. It's because of many small decisions, repeated consistently. Change your routines, and over time, you change your life. But if you ignore them, they will still shape you just in directions you never intended. Routine is also the foundation of mastery. When you see someone perform at a world-class level, when you see someone create effortlessly under pressure, when you see someone dominate in their craft, you are witnessing the result of routines practiced so often that they became instinct. A dancer doesn't think about each step on stage because the routine of training has embedded it into muscle memory. A surgeon doesn't panic in the middle of a critical procedure because the routine of preparation and repetition has created calm under stress. An athlete doesn't freeze in the championship moment because the routine of relentless practice has wired confidence into their system. Routine removes hesitation. Routine creates certainty. Routine builds unshakable confidence. It's important to understand that routines are not about perfection. They're about consistency. People ruin themselves by thinking they need the perfect plan, the perfect strategy, the perfect moment. But the truth is, even a simple, imperfect routine followed daily will outperform the grandest plan that is abandoned after a week. Success is not about intensity for a moment. It's about consistency over a lifetime. That's why the person who trains moderately but regularly will outlast the person who trains intensely but sporadically. That's why the person who studies a little every day will outperform the one who crams once in a while. That's why the person who saves small amounts consistently will build more wealth. than the one chasing risky jackpots. Routine beats extremes. Another reason routine shapes reality is because it builds identity. The things you repeatedly do become the story you tell yourself about who you are. If you show up to the gym daily, you no longer just see yourself as someone who works out. You become an athlete. If you write every day, you don't just try to be a writer, you are a writer. If you keep promises to yourself daily, you begin to see yourself as disciplined, capable, unstoppable. Identity is not built by what you wish to be, but by what your routines prove you are. And when your identity shifts, your reality follows because your actions naturally align with who you believe you are. People sometimes argue that routines make life rigid, that they strip away spontaneity. But the opposite is true. Strong routines actually create freedom because they handle the essentials automatically, leaving space for creativity and spontaneity to thrive without derailing your progress. Without routines, life becomes reactive, chaotic, unstable. With routines, life becomes intentional, steady, and focused. You don't get blown around by every distraction. You don't chase every impulse. You live from a place of clarity. And that clarity is what creates space for true freedom. Because you're not enslaved by constant decision making or the pull of every distraction. When you study greatness, you realize that legendary figures across history, athletes, artists, leaders, relied on routines. They didn't wait for inspiration to strike. They built routines that forced inspiration to find them at work. The musician who practices scales daily eventually discovers melodies. The artist who sketches every day eventually paints masterpieces. The leader who studies and reflects daily eventually shapes vision with impact. None of them were simply carried by desire or raw talent. They were carried by routines that shaped their reality until greatness became inevitable. Routine shapes reality because it turns intentions into evidence. Without routines, your intentions remain unproven. They stay in the realm of ideas and wishes. But when you repeat actions daily, you accumulate proof that you are serious, that you are committed, that you are moving forward. And that proof is what creates belief. You start to trust yourself. And once you trust yourself, you become unstoppable. Small wins stack into greatness because success has never been about one giant leap. It has always been about a series of tiny steps that accumulate over time until the world looks back and calls it greatness. The problem is most people ignore the small wins. They underestimate them. They look for big breakthroughs, dramatic changes, overnight transformations, but life doesn't work that way. Every great structure you see, the tallest skyscraper, the strongest bridge, the most powerful empire, was built brick by brick, piece by piece, moment by moment. And the same is true for personal success. Every little choice you make, every small victory you collect, every time you resist the urge to quit, those stack together. And over time, they create a version of yourself you never thought possible. Small wins are powerful because they build momentum. Momentum doesn't come from rare flashes of genius or one-time effort. It comes from consistent progress. Think about pushing a heavy boulder. At first, it feels impossible. You strain, you sweat, you push with everything you've got, and it barely moves. But once it starts rolling, once you've nudged it just enough to shift its weight, it becomes easier to push. And as it rolls downhill, it gains a force of its own. That's how small wins work. At first, they seem insignificant. One workout, one page of writing, $1 saved, one extra hour of practice. But each one adds to your momentum, and eventually, the weight of those wins creates unstoppable force. Greatness is not the product of dramatic moments. It's the accumulation of habits. The compounding effect of small wins repeated thousands of times. An athlete doesn't become a champion the day they win a medal. They became a champion on the countless days they showed up to train, the days they repeated the same drill until it was wired into their muscles. A student doesn't become brilliant by cramming the night before the exam. They become brilliant through the small win of consistent study, the daily commitment to learning a little more. An entrepreneur doesn't become successful because of one deal. They become successful because of the small wins of knocking on doors, making calls, solving problems day after day. The challenge is that small wins don't feel glamorous. They don't feel like success when you're in the middle of them. Waking up early doesn't feel like a victory, but it stacks. Eating one clean meal doesn't feel like progress, but it stacks. Reading a few pages a day doesn't feel like transformation, but it stacks. And when these actions stack day after day, they become powerful. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't isn't usually talent. It isn't opportunity. It isn't luck. It's who was willing to honor the small wins and trust that they would eventually add up to something greater. Small wins also build confidence. Every time you follow through on a commitment, no matter how minor it seems, you send yourself a message. I can be trusted. I keep my promises. I do what I say I will do. That self-trust is the foundation of confidence, and confidence is the fuel for bigger risks and bigger challenges. Too many people try to skip small wins and aim for giant victories. But without confidence built through smaller steps, they crumble under the weight of the big challenge. You don't lift 300 pounds on your first day in the gym. You start with the bar. You add weight gradually. Each small win makes you stronger until one day you're doing things that once seemed impossible. Small wins are also the antidote to procrastination. When you stare at a massive goal, it feels overwhelming. Writing a book sounds intimidating. Building a business feels impossible. Changing your lifestyle feels too big. That's why people freeze, delay, make excuses. But when you break it down into small wins, just write a paragraph today, just make one phone call, just go for a short walk, you remove the weight of overwhelm. You give yourself something achievable, something within reach. And when you achieve it, even if it's small, you feel the satisfaction of progress. That satisfaction motivates you to take the next step, and soon you've built momentum where before there was only paralysis. Small wins are what transform discipline into habit. When you repeat small actions consistently, they stop feeling like effort and start becoming automatic. At first, forcing yourself to wake up early feels painful. But after weeks of small wins, it becomes part of your identity. You don't even think about it. At first, saving money feels like sacrifice. But after months of small wins, it feels natural, and your bank account begins to grow in ways you once thought impossible. At first, practicing your craft feels tedious. But after years of small wins, you find yourself performing with mastery that feels effortless. That transformation never happens in one moment. It happens gradually, invisibly, through the stacking of small wins. People often admire greatness and think it came suddenly. They see the gold medal, the bestseller, the billion-dollar company, the perfect performance, and they think it was one breakthrough, one magical event. But what they didn't see were the thousands of days behind it. They didn't see the mornings when no one clapped, the sacrifices no one noticed, the routines no one cared about. Small wins don't get applause, but they are the foundation for the applause later. You cannot cheat the process. You cannot skip the grind. Greatness is simply small wins stacked long enough that they become undeniable. There's also something psychological about small wins. They rewire your brain to recognize progress. When you set giant goals and fail to hit them immediately, you feel defeated. That defeat kills motivation. But when you set smaller goals and win consistently, your brain releases dopamine, reinforcing the habit and making you want to keep going. This is why successful people always break down their goals into manageable steps. They engineer a system of small wins to keep themselves engaged, focused, and driven. They don't wait for the finish line to celebrate. They celebrate the milestones along the way, and that energy keeps them moving forward. Think about climbing a mountain. If you stare at the peak from the bottom, it feels impossible. The distance looks endless, the climb feels overwhelming. But if you focus on one step at a time, one small win of moving forward, soon you look back and realize you've covered incredible ground. That's life. That's success. It's not about leaping to the peak in one motion. It's about stacking small wins until the summit is within reach. And when you reach it, people will call you extraordinary, but you'll know the truth. You just did ordinary things consistently until they became extraordinary. Small wins also create resilience. When life knocks you down, when you face setbacks, when your big plans collapse, you can still lean on the habit of small wins to keep you grounded. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you failed a test. Maybe your project fell apart, but you can still wake up early. You can still exercise. You can still read. You can still practice. Those small wins remind you that you are still in control. That progress is still possible. That forward motion hasn't stopped. Resilience is not built by avoiding failure. It's built by learning to keep stacking small wins, even in the middle of failure. Another truth about small wins is that they attract opportunity. Success has a way of finding those who consistently show up. You may not control when the big break comes, but if you've been stacking small wins, you'll be ready when it does. Too many people wait for the big opportunity before they prepare. And when it finally comes, they're not ready. But the person who has been quietly stacking small wins day after day is always prepared. When the door opens, they don't hesitate. They walk through it with confidence because they've been training for that moment all along. The beauty of small wins is that they belong to everyone. You don't need privilege. You don't need connections. You don't need extraordinary talent to start stacking them. You just need commitment. You just need to decide that no matter how small the action, you will honor it. You will repeat it. You will trust that it matters. And when you do, you put yourself on the same path as every champion, every leader, every creator, because all of them built their greatness the same way, through small wins. Focus lasts longer than hype because hype is temporary fuel. It comes in loud, it burns bright, but it fades quickly. And when it fades, most people stop moving because they were depending on the noise instead of their own clarity. Focus is different. Focus doesn't need a crowd. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need to be seen. Focus is the ability to lock in on what matters and tune out what doesn't, to keep moving forward when the excitement has died, to see through the distractions and temptations that pull others away. That's why focus outlives hype. Hype can push you to start, but focus is what carries you to finish. Hype is built on external energy. It's the cheers from others, the temporary inspiration, the motivational video, the trending story that makes you feel like now is the time to move. And yes, hype can give you a spark, but sparks don't keep fires alive. Sparks fade in seconds unless you feed them with fuel, and the only real fuel is focus. Focus is internal energy. It comes from clarity of vision, from knowing exactly why you're doing something, from locking your eyes on the target and refusing to let them wander. When everyone else runs after hype, chasing the newest trend, the newest wave, the newest distraction, the focused person stays steady, keeps building, keeps grinding, keeps showing up. You can see this everywhere. Look at the gym in January. The hype is high. Everyone is there, motivated by the noise of New Year's resolutions, by the excitement of a fresh start. But come March, most of them are gone because hype wore off. The ones who remain are not the ones who had the loudest hype. They're the ones who had the deepest focus. They didn't depend on the external energy of crowds. They depended on their own discipline, their own clarity. And because of that, they outlasted everyone else. Hype excites people, but focus builds people. Hype gives you adrenaline, but focus gives you results. Hype says do it now because it feels good. Focus says do it again and again until it works, even when it doesn't feel good. Hype is emotional, focus is strategic. Hype feeds your ego, focus feeds your purpose. When hype dies, Most quit because they don't have focus to sustain them. But those who stay focused prove that consistency will always outlast intensity. Focus lasts longer than hype because focus sharpens your mind while hype scatters it. When you're caught in hype, you get pulled in different directions. You want to try everything. You want to do what everyone else is doing. But when you're focused, you cut out the noise. You stop chasing every new thing. You lock in on your lane and you run it with everything you've got. And the world might not notice at first because focus is quiet. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't need to be flashy. But in time, focus produces something undeniable. When you study those who achieved greatness, you don't see people who depended on hype. You see people who depended on focus. Think about athletes who train year after year, long after the cameras are gone. Think about entrepreneurs who keep building when their ideas aren't popular yet. Think about students who grind through late nights when everyone else is partying. None of that is hype. That's focus. And because focus lasts longer, they're still standing when the hype-driven crowd has disappeared. Hype is about the crowd. Focus is about the craft. Hype is about how it looks. Focus is about how it works. Hype is about being seen. Focus is about being effective. And if you have to choose, always choose focus because the crowd is temporary, but your craft is forever. There are millions of people who were once hyped up, who once had the spotlight, but they couldn't stay because they weren't focused. They got distracted by applause. They got lost in the noise. They started chasing validation instead of execution. But the ones who stayed locked in on the mission, the ones who kept sharpening their skills, the ones who didn't let hype distract them, those are the ones who became legends. Hype is addictive because it feels good. Everyone wants recognition. Everyone wants to feel like they're making progress. Everyone wants validation. But focus is about delaying gratification. Focus is about being willing to go unseen, being willing to grind in silence, being willing to prepare for years with no applause. Because you know the applause will come when it's earned. That's why most people never master focus. They're addicted to hype. And when hype runs out, so does their effort. But those who master focus don't care if the world claps or not, because they know their work will speak when the time is right. Focus lasts longer than hype because focus gives you direction. Hype gives you speed, but with no direction, speed is dangerous. Imagine driving a car at full speed with no map, no clarity, no destination. You'll crash. That's hype. Now imagine driving steadily with a clear GPS, knowing exactly where you're headed. You'll arrive. That's focus. Too many people run fast in the wrong direction because hype told them to move. They waste years chasing trends, chasing applause, chasing what looks good instead of what works. But the focused person, even if they move slower, ends up further because they never left their lane. Focus is also what carries you through boredom. Success is not exciting every day. Success is not a highlight reel. Success is repetition, monotony, doing the same thing again and again until you master it. Hype dies in boredom because hype needs stimulation, hype needs novelty. But focus thrives in boredom because focus understands that mastery is hidden in repetition. You don't become great by doing new things all the time. You become great by doing the right things consistently until you can't get them wrong. That's what focus does. It keeps you steady when hype fades. When life gets hard, when challenges hit, hype disappears. No one feels hyped when they're broke, when they fail, when they're rejected, when they're tired. That's why you can't depend on it. Focus is what keeps you steady in those moments. Focus says, I don't care how I feel, I know where I'm going. Focus says, I don't care about this setback. I'm still locked in. Focus says the storm can rage, the noise can rise, the distractions can scream, but I won't move because I know my target. That's why focus lasts longer, because it's rooted in clarity, not emotion. The difference between hype and focus is the difference between a sparkler and a torch. A sparkler lights up fast, it shines bright, it excites you, but in seconds it's gone. A torch burns steady, it gives light for the long journey, it endures through the night. Hype makes noise, focus makes progress. And the people who build legacies, the people who endure, the people who outlast everyone else, they are not the ones who chased hype, they are the ones who carried the torch of focus. Focus also teaches patience. Hype makes you rush. It makes you believe success should come instantly. But focus teaches you that real results take time, that building something worthwhile requires patience, sacrifice, endurance. Hype wants shortcuts. Focus wants the real thing. Hype wants instant validation. Focus wants lasting impact. And if you're willing to be patient, if you're willing to stay focused when it feels like nothing is happening, you will eventually see growth others never see because they quit too early chasing hype. Focus is not glamorous. Focus is not loud. Focus is not easy. But it is powerful. It is steady. It is unshakable. And that's why it lasts longer than hype. Every single person can get hyped for a moment, but very few can stay focused for years. And that's the difference between the crowd that disappears and the few who build greatness.